there is a fan in Colorado who has sued the NFL over Shedeur Sanders' fall in this draft, claiming emotional distress, trauma, whatever. And look, I'm no lawyer, and Sammy, you aren't either. So nope. I don't think we can really speak to the legalese of this, but I can say that this is something that the NFL needs to squash with an atomic bomb level of reaction, because the last thing sports needs are fans feeling comfortable filing emotional-based, I'm disappointed in sports lawsuits. You know, the results are not guaranteed here, folks. You can't sue the league because you didn't like an outcome. That can't happen. What can happen is us trying to up this conversation to an actual level of there's some value attached to it. And in the single most Jewish move of Sammy's career, he brought his lawyer to today's show. I love it.
So perfect.
Mr. Bruce, Shohei Patesh, how are you guys?
This is Drew Sherman. He is a good friend of Sam's. I've met Drew, I believe, too, in the past.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And Drew has been a longtime admirer of Ike Sandwiches, of Bay Area Sports Talk Radio, and the law. Look at ESQ. That stands for Esquire. That means he doesn't need to call anyone to be lawyered up. He looks in the mirror and he's lawyered up. Beyond that, Colorado alum?
Definitely.
Go ahead. Hit us with it.
Oh, there it is. The buff set.
There it is. So, Drew, I don't know how you feel about Shedeur, but I do know that you love the law. Yeah. When you saw this come out, what did you think?
First of all, let me just say that the guy who filed this lawsuit is not a CU alum. He's just a full-fledged CU fan, really a Dion fan, now a Shedeur fan. Listen, and I have the lawsuit right here.
Wow.
Took a read of it. It's going to be thrown out pretty quick. It's going to be subject to what's called a 12B6 motion to dismiss. Although here's the interesting part is that, courts are instructed to give people chances to amend their complaints to try to get it in compliance. So the judge, though he might, throw out the lawsuit, it might come back a couple more times, and you might give the plaintiff a couple more times to get it right. We'll see. But as you were saying, D. Bruce, my counsel to my clients in business, when something like this happens, and I'm right there with you, is to say, the first time that somebody F's around with you, you go after them, and you go after them hard, no matter how insignificant they are effing around with you. You make an example of them, so nobody else in the industry comes back at you and tries to F around again with you. You show no mercy to the first person, the first business, whoever that really tries to mess around with you. Make an example and show the world you're not messing around. So I agree with you. This is a frivolous lawsuit. It's interesting. He did some things right. He also did some things very wrong in drafting this complaint. But like I said, the NFL could file a motion for sanctions, a federal Rule 26 motion for sanctions for frivolous pleading. They can also file, at least here in LA, in the Central District of California, which is Los Angeles, you can file something for being a vexatious litigant. Usually takes a couple more lawsuits to get to that point. But, if they have the grounds, they could, and it's, kind of akin to what we have here in California and LA, which I'm sure it is. They can have him deemed a vexatious litigant, which will keep him out of the courts and possibly subject him to sanctions. I mean, he's trying to get, it's interesting because he's really doing a lawsuit on behalf of Shedeur Sanders, but trying to claim his own emotional distress for $100 million. It's going to get thrown out.
Wouldn't there be like an equivalent of, I was disturbed driving past this graphic traffic accident, and I would like to sue the two people who were in the accident that disturbed me?
Here's the example that I thought of as I was reading this. It would be like if I sued LA County and the Los Angeles County lifeguards for allowing me to go to Malibu and get a sunburn. That's what it basically is like. He has no standing. He has no, his injuries are not foreseeable, which is causation, which is something that you have to show that there's a but-for cause for your injuries, and that it's approximately cause, meaning it's foreseeable by the defendant that you could injure that plaintiff, etc. So getting into the weeds a little bit on the legalese of it, but yeah, it's basically as you described, walking through seeing an accident, being emotionally distressed by that, or like I said, going down to Malibu, getting a sunburn, and then blaming it on LA County and lifeguards for allowing the beaches to be open.
Quoting Mona Lisa Vito here, Sporticus, the defense is wrong.
Right.
Positive traction was not available on the Plymouth Dart.
That movie was shown in law school actually as the most accurate film depiction of how to do a litigation, how to get evidence into a trial. Funny enough, so My Cousin Vinny is a very prominent movie to watch in law school.
Sue everybody.
Thank you.
So Drew, I've got So that's the Jerky Boys there, but I have a real question for you because when I read this story initially from the headline, I thought, and I was excited to share it with Damon, thinking, "Oh my God, wait! The Sanders family, is suing the league for the distress of what happened to Shedeur in dropping in the draft and having to wait 2 full days for this, including a prank call in the middle of it on a Friday night." And I thought, well, this is interesting. I said it'll be horrible news for the Browns, of course, but wow, maybe there's something here to this. What if, and we understand this is a fan filing list for the fact that he's just upset that this happened to a player that he thought was going to go somewhere else. So that part makes it a little bit ridiculous. But what if this was filed by the Sanders family to say that there was emotional distress to our son for the fact that he was assuming he would be drafted based on what the league had given us, the information the league had given us. We thought he was going to be drafted on Thursday. He doesn't get drafted on Saturday. And he is enduring the stress of what is happening on television and in the media towards him with his name being sullied, etc.
And a prank phone call, which the NFL was responsible for creating.
What about that?
The prank phone call, a little more tenuous on getting the NFL as a liable party. Definitely, who was it? Robert Saleh's kid, I think it was.
No, not Saleh. No, not Saleh from the Niners. It was Ulbrich.
Ulbrich.
Yeah. With the Falcons, not the Niners.
Mr. Saleh and your child.
Yes, exactly.
That's bold on bold crime right there. You walk it through. We'll sue this.
Funny enough, Hebrews, I tell my barber, I go in, I'm like, make me look like Robert Saleh because he looks great bald. And I'm like, make me look like that.
Today I called him, he's young Telly Savalas.
Yes.
Yes.
He's great. But yeah, a little more tenuous on that one. But Sam, you bring up a really good point because, we've all heard about during draft process how teams will allow leaks to happen and make certain comments that maybe they know is not true essentially about the draft pick in order to have him fall in the draft, in order to get up to the point where they could, a different team could draft him. In the law, there is a legal theory, cause of action, called intentional infliction with prospective economic advantage. Which means that if you have two parties who are going to do a deal, right, and a contract, maybe they're not in the contract yet, maybe they are, they're getting into one, and a third party, usually a competitor, does something out of just trying to get the business from one of those parties, but commits a fraud, slander, which is what one of the claims are in this lawsuit, is that, the teams that let leak a couple of things were slandering him. And if they were statements made that were not true, that they were false, that is slander. That is also libel if it's actually written down. Slander is spoken word. And so if it can be shown that certain teams made statements they knew were not true and leaked it out to the press in order to have Shedeur drop in the draft so they could get to him when those other teams that were higher up on the draft board were going to draft them, that actually, in my mind, has a viable legal grounds to do a cause of action, state cause of action, not a federal cause of action necessarily, but could get into federal court for a intentional infliction with prospective economic advantage. That is a real cause of action where the Sanders camp could, it would be Shedeur, because he would be the one damaged by that essentially, in his money, in the amount of money going down that he would be paid per his draft status. That actually is a viable cause of action. The thing about it is, man, that is going to create all kinds of litigation for all the drafts moving forward.
Drew.
Yeah.
Stop what you said. Think about this. Shedeur Sanders is an example that went well beyond what we thought. But how many players in the history of this draft, and Damon, we do this all the time, how many players thought they were going to be drafted somewhere that end up getting drafted 10, 12, 15, 25 spots below where they thought they were going to be. And not only that, what Drew just said, every team is lying. Every team is lying about these players in the hopes that the player will fall to them. There would be 32 lawsuits after every single first round if this were to happen.
Right. Outside of the number one pick in the draft, everyone's got a claim, right?
Yes.
Sam, think about this. Not only would you have the players possibly filing lawsuits, but you don't think that it's beyond Drew Rosenhaus to file a lawsuit as the agent who lost money because of the interference with the prospective economic advantage of the clients that they have signed. And any agent, any lawyer who's representing those people, any manager, it could go extend out forward even to sponsorships, companies who are potentially sponsoring given the draft status, and maybe they already have the deal signed with the draft pick, and because of where they think he's going to be drafted. Yeah, this could create all kinds of headaches. The interesting thing about this, though, it is it does have legs enough to get past a 12B6 motion to dismiss.
And look, we're talking about it. It is a headline. I mean, in the sports world, this is a headline. As ridiculous as it may be, this is not a story we got from The Onion. This is a story. This is a lawsuit that was filed, and all it takes is for someone to know that lawsuit was filed, and now here it has legs. It's got oxygen. We're giving it some, and it's real.
Let me ask you this, Drew, because it feels like, sports every decade or so has an actual issue that borders on illegality, sucker punches in hockey games, career injuries due to, that looked like a little bit of a cheap shot more than it was in the regular flow of play. How does sports basically inoculate itself from the HR meetings that we all have to sit through when we go to work?
Remember Reggie Bush? Reggie Bush sued, I believe, the city of St. Louis, Damon, if I remember correctly. He slipped in the end zone on the paint, I believe, that the team had used for drawing the logo.
Or some concrete area on the
right.
Yeah,
Exactly. So, exactly.
At what point does sports get to say, no, the law doesn't necessarily apply to what's happening in between the chalk? What gives sports that protective shield?
It's just history, tradition. Just like basically the MLB is a legal monopoly in a sense. And they've already kind of litigated that and said it's allowed. It's obviously in contracts that you have with the teams, the players, there's waivers involved. Now, no waiver is ironclad, and you can't, waive all causes of action for anything. But, I always think about this whenever Clemson is walking down the hill, into their stadium when touching the rock. Walking in cleats is not that easy, and you're walking down a slick hill. I can't believe that not more of those college players fall. That's every time I see that, that's what I'm thinking of. College is a little more insulated than obviously the professional ranks, but they have seminars for sexual harassment for the players, about avoiding it and being part of it. Essentially, they have workers' comp. Sports teams have workers' compensation insurance for the staff, but also for the players as well. They're not so insulated from the traditional legal causes of action and remedies that we have in the real world. But yeah, you're right. I mean, quintessential example is hockey. How do those guys not get arrested for assault and battery every time they fight? It's just kind of look the other way, and nobody presses charges because essentially, it's up to the district attorney who's not going to do it, because nobody's going to, especially for a home team player, especially if it's a good player, nobody's.
Look, Marty McSorley, Donald Brashear, there was absolutely legal action for that, where he used the stick as a weapon is what the claim was in that. Now, to Damon's point, Drew, getting this thing thrown out immediately so that the league doesn't have to suffer this for other items. If we're talking emotional distress as a fan, couldn't you theoretically go to the Vegas odds, and any fan who says my team was favored, therefore expected to win this game, series, championship, etc., and it did not happen, it caused me emotional distress. To think my team with an educated opinion was going to win this, and it didn't happen. I was expecting certain things. I promised my son a certain thing. We planned a vacation for a parade for certain things, and it did not happen. Couldn't that therefore be any loss would then be subject to a lawsuit because there is a. How about this?
Oh, I want you to cover my gambling debt.
Okay, amazing, Damon. I didn't even think of that. Gambling debt based on your performance, right? But then think about any highlight you watch or any cutaway in a game where you have a fan burying his face, right? You have a kid who's crying, right? I took my son to the game and he was crying. And funny enough, we're having you on this week and we're not even talking about at the Pirates game, the fan who fell out of the stands. I mean, real legal action there. Again, at a Pirates game, we had there was an assault from someone that worked for the team that in the concessions that was fighting with a fan as well. Forget about all that. I'm just talking about, could wins and losses be subject to lawsuits at that point?
Yeah, no. The simple answer is simply not, because essentially, with regard to emotional distress, the standard that you have to meet, it's a pretty high standard. I mean, the conduct has to be so offensive to the normal person that the judges will allow it to move forward. I mean, we get these all the time in lawsuits here in LA County, and where people are claiming intentional infliction of emotional distress. The problem with that is that the conduct has to be so vile, so out of control, so offensive to the ordinary person, to the reasonable person, that most of those causes of action get thrown out at what's called the pleading stage, meaning the complaint and answer, before we get even into discovery. Now, when you make bets, you're taking that risk essentially. And anytime that you make a bet in Vegas, when you get the ticket back, it says on it, there's a disclaimer saying you realize that you're making a bet and it's possible.
All bets are action, baby. All bets are action.
It's the same thing, right, with regard to the gambling commercials on TV. They have to put that disclaimer now on the bottom that says, if you have a problem with gambling, call 1-800, because it helps, insulate them from any causes of action that somebody might bring, because, lawyers are horrible. And will bring any sort of lawsuit that they can think of to the table. Everybody hates us until they need us, and so that's what it is. But no, I mean, it would be it would create too much litigation. You're taking the risk when you go into being a fan of a team. It's just the conduct, as I said, has to be foreseeable to the plaintiff, meaning the defendant's actions have to reasonably be foreseeable that you could injure the plaintiff. But for the defendant's actions, the plaintiff would not have been injured. So,
Drew,
meeting those standards it's too much to litigate. And there's also keep in mind that lawyers have an obligation not to bring frivolous lawsuits. It has to be, you have to have a reasonable basis for bringing a lawsuit. And if lawyers start bringing these things, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't risk my license for that.
What about suing? Yeah. So, okay. So basically we won't see a lawsuit against Artie Moreno and the Angels for wasting a decade of Mike Trout's Hall of Fame career, where he's a multiple-time MVP and the team won 0 playoff games in that time, right?
Can I bring a lawsuit against the Oilers for the Kings losing 4 years in a row to the Oilers? I mean,
exactly. We're suing Edmonton for even being involved with the distress that they've caused the Kings fans. Exactly.
I want to bring a lawsuit against Carl Durrell for CU's 1-11 season or whatever it was right before.
All I can tell you is that instead of us trying to think what this would have looked like from a legal standpoint, having you come in here today and shed real light on it was fantastic. We're 40 minutes into the show. I'm guessing you're rounding that up and charging us for the full hour. So we're just going to get the hell out of here right now.
Every 6 minutes.
Every 6 minutes. Shit. And we got to go right now. Drew, thank you very, very much. Tell everyone how much you like eating at Ike's.
Let me tell you something, D. Bruce. I was going to bring this up when I first came on, that my son's favorite sandwich, and he asked for it all. Can we go to Ike's? And the one sandwich that he loves is the Damon Bruce sandwich. He orders it all the friggin' time. And he didn't even know who you were. And then I showed him and I told him, yeah, I know him. And Sam knows him. And when I was in law school, that's when I first met Damon Bruce up in San Francisco. And he was living with Sam, and because my son knows Sam very well. And he was like, no way. And so now he's all about the Damon Bruce sandwich. And we have an Ike's right in the shopping center, right around the corner from my house. So he's loving that. So we thank you for your sandwich, D. Bruce. Thank you to Ike. Make sure whenever you talk to him, thank him for me and thank him for Max. I also got to give a shout out to Alan Sherman and loving the Knicks, recovering from surgery. So got to give a shout out to that. But man, love you guys. Miss you guys. Anytime you guys want me to come on and talk about anything, CU or otherwise, legal, I'm here for you guys anytime.
We'll book you for at least 6 minutes.
6 minutes. As soon as you hit 6 minutes, 30 seconds, though, we're going, it's the next billing cycle. So just so you know.
I understand how it works. I understand.
Okay.
I get it.
All
Thank you so much. Drew Sherman joining us with the scoop on all legalese. I'm glad the show has a lawyer, not only because it makes us sound smarter, but eventually, Sam, we're probably going to need one.
We'll need him. We'll need him. We'll need Drew. It's always good to have that friend in your back pocket. That's for sure.